with, all right, let's start with the, the swap item on the agenda. Kevin, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so can you all hear me? I think you can. Uh, I'm probably going to share a little doc. Could I get host access?
Sergey, are you able to give Kevin host?
I just did.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so generally we've been making a lot of testing of swap, and I guess it's in the beta 1. I have a doc where we were kind of going through some of the pain points we found and kind of bringing this up for what we need for beta 2. I think the big one is that generally swap is a pretty advanced feature, and we actually did not have a way of opting out of swap. And I think why this is important is when we were working on a PR to fail swap if C groups v1 was on, we actually discovered that kind and the development environments actually use this field even though they're not using swap. So we didn't want to break that existing use case where people are running kubelet with fail swap off as false and C groups v1. And also addition, I think that this feature we probably should, even when we GA, I think there might be some tuning with it, because what we've experienced is there's a lot of kernel modifications people can make and also turning it off. I think we want to be a bit more careful on this one. So in the next KEP, I proposed a new field for swap memory configuration, which allows you to essentially run with fail swap off false, and you disable swap for workloads. It is, I guess, a change from the behavior because by default we were actually setting swap to unlimited once the feature toggle was turned on, and the only way to disable this was to turn the feature toggle off, which really isn't possible in GA. And I guess the other part, we were told that the eviction issue was a blocker for going from beta 1 to beta 2. We've had a couple people and me try to reproduce this. We were not able to reproduce the issue that the person brought up. And then we also noticed that when people start tuning the kernel, a lot of their problems seem to go away with swap, because a lot of it is about how quickly the kernel is swapping out memory, and that can be easily changed. So I think we're at least good to go for bringing this up, promoting it to our second beta. I have an update for the KEP, but I just wanted to see if there were any, want to bring that up if there are any questions or anything that people have concerns about.
So I think, Kevin, one thing is, are we going to introduce a way to disable swap for the system slice? Because we want to ensure that the system daemons aren't swapped.
Yeah, I mean, in the KEP, I kind of wrote a series of best practices. I wasn't clear if kubelet should be setting stuff in the system slice, or if Kubernetes should be setting that or not, because it does impact more than just kubelet. So we put a recommendation to disable swap for the system slice, and we also noticed that in order to avoid swap from taking down system daemons, you also have to change your IO latency, because you don't want workloads to take priority for swap over the daemons, or sorry, for IO. So I wrote that in the KEP as kind of a best practices for configuring. I'm not exactly clear how opinionated we are on the Kubernetes side about that, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with the approach that you took where you just document it. I think at most, like maybe the kubelet could warn, but honestly, like the system slice, unless you're configuring like the kubelet itself, I think that's kind of out of the scope for the kubelet, because you're right, there are other processes, and it's kind of up to the cluster admin and like the, whatever operating system they choose to see what that behavior is.
Yeah, the way I see it is we need to make sure that we have a way to do that, and it's very clearly documented. The worst outcome maybe if there is some security vulnerability when enabling swap for seemingly non-problematic area will leak all the secrets somehow through the disk backups. So we want to make sure that we made it easy for customers not to get into this trap and be able to install everything securely. So if recommendations cover like all that, it should be enough.
And so I guess that's kind of what I was wondering for GA. Like, I guess going with a way of turning this off is probably smart rather than, because we can't rely on a feature toggle for GA. So I think that what we're realizing is this KEP is very it can be very involved with just tuning of the kernel, and I don't know if I think I'll read a bit more about the encrypted swap and also add that as a section in my doc about recommendations on that end. I don't know if we can do much more than that in that end also.
May I just suggest, I like what you approach. May I just, this is Don, sorry. And may I just suggest, just like what you suggest, the default no swap. I think just default no swap for all the work nodes, and then separate the top default no swap for the system daemons. So, but we still have like the potential extension in the long term. But on the other hand, for GA, just like what you say, because we disable, default is no. So how we are going to from the beta 2 to go to graduate to the GA? Let's have like real cases. I recently talked to some people. They are on the database and they really want to enable off the swap on the node for their work node, this database work node. So maybe we can take that as example and have the production usage, and then make that figure out what's the requirement for the GA.
Yeah, I think the main issue with the fail swap off is I think we were thinking that no one really set that field, because why would you have that set without swap? But then we were finding a lot of cases where that was. So I think we took a bit more conservative approach and decided to kind of have the feature has its own way of turning that off without relying on an existing flag that people are using without this feature. So that's kind of, I mean, like I think it also kind of gets less and less important as we deprecate cgroups v1. But I think currently that was the main, when I was working on a PR to fail kubelet if cgroups v1 and fail swap were enabled, and I discovered that kind actually has a default setting for the CI for running with fail swap on as false. So I got a lot of CI test failures, and I didn't think it was really worth trying to push those to change that across the CI. So that's kind of why I went this route. So I don't know, for GA, that's kind of why I was thinking the default should be no swap, so we don't break those use cases right now.
But you came from more from the backward compatibility perspective. What I mentioned that those database is more from the usability perspective, but it's the some of the user, the developer, they're really keen about this feature. They want to enable this feature, but they have some difficulty to enable this feature now to bring down other work nodes. So that's kind of the usability perspective, how to configure swap. So that's why I think about maybe we can using those as a concrete example to get the requirement for the graduate beta 2 to GA.
All right, I'll follow up with you offline and get more clarity on that one.
Yeah, I think Don. I think when we originally started that, we thought of two buckets. One is for the system, and one is the workloads. Now I think you're talking about one more subcategory. That are you thinking of enabling it for all the workloads, or going to a workload and having a switch saying, okay, just enable it for this particular one? So for the database one, I think we need to figure out whether, oh, this is a node dedicated to running only databases, so it's okay for all workloads to enable it.
I want to restate what my on the swap. I always think about the swap should be default, should be off. Only for certain workload, like a database, can be explicit set, because once we enable swap, there's a lot of things, no matter performance or the complexity into our system. So it's very difficult to track. So this is from day one. I want to default off. And
when you say default off, Don, you mean for a given workload. So like not just for the node, but for the workload
Yes.
selected by the workload.
Yes, yes, yes. So the only thing it is, once we enable this kind of things, obviously you introduce the complexity to the node, not just to the work node.
Right.
So then we need to talk about the usability, to like the when you which node, what kind of the node can enable, right? So there's the intent, and then those kind of information exposure, and so certain workload can avoid to the schedule to the node on the enable of the swap. So those kind of things we can discuss based on that engage with people, like want to really
Yeah. No, I think I totally agree. And I think what we are also thinking now, what we'll actually need is not just, oh, enable it for all the pods, but I want to pick the pods on which I want to enable it.
Yes.
Otherwise, it'll be hard to figure out the performance and tune it.
Totally. Yeah. This is why I always want to swap with the off mode until like
Right. Yeah.
only particularly, yeah.
Okay.
That's why we need SIG 2 as well, because on SIG 1 it's really hard to implement.
Yeah, for sure. I think it should be V2 only. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that generally we were kind of thinking this workloads and usability. I think we're sort of envisioning maybe a future KEP to kind of target on a per workload basis. Right now, the focus was really on, I mean, we have enabling swap on the system, and then I think we have the ability for burstable pods to use swap via limited, but we don't really have a pod API to disallow or allow swap more than that. So I think
Yes.
there is definitely some room for improvement, and that is called out in the KEP as kind of being future work, because I think we need at least some way of enabling swap on the node before we start thinking about workloads. And that was sort of, I think, the general consensus made on the KEP at least.
Just a side note that the Cure resources kept that I'm working on that lists swap as one possible use case, and exactly for this kind of setup that you can for workload say that, okay, I want swap, or I don't care, or I don't want swap, and then you would also see on which nodes swap would be enabled and on which not. So it could be one solution to this, like more fine-grained control and scheduling of swap.
Yeah. Oh, and the last point I was wondering about for swap, but thank you, Marcus. Yeah, could you link that, the KEP?
I'll comment it in your KEP. Yes, I was going to do that.
Thank you.
Yes.
And so the last point for swap that we're realizing we're kind of not sure the path forward is we actually neglected eviction manager with swap completely in the KEP, which I think was a design, but I am wondering, like, what do we want the eviction manager to know if you're running out of swap? Do you want to start evicting pods? Because currently we kind of don't monitor swap at all in eviction. So it's one thing that I think the simplest fix could be adding a new signal in the eviction manager to monitor swap and mark the node as having memory pressure if you're coming close to running out of swap. I don't know if that should be part of this KEP.
So I think that may make sense if swap is kind of overcommitted and the workload is going beyond what it's supposed to be using. But as far as I remember, I think on the limited swap case, it's scaled to what the workload has requested, so it can never go beyond
Yeah.
its fair share.
So that's, yeah, it's fine for limited. I guess that is a concern with unlimited. And I don't, if we want to protect against unlimited swap with eviction or drop unlimited.
Yeah, I think probably we need we need use cases, as Don said, if what the use case is for unlimited really.
Okay. All right. I think I have a few in mind, so I'll add that as part of the KEP. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I think that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. So I think now we can jump back. Sorry, Don, you're saying something.
Can I ask one last question? Why we support unlimited swap? At first, I forgot because it's been a long time. So several years we go on this. Why we support unlimited swap? The first place.
That kind of predates.
Yeah, so Don, it was so when Itamar was working on this functionality, there was a request from one of the reviewers to keep it because in their view, unlimited swap is not, it's just like limited swap. Let's say you create a pod that consumes the whole memory of the node. It's like unlimited. So there's no difference between limited and unlimited. I wish I had that link there, but there was a discussion to keep it because you can use the limited swap as unlimited if you just specify big enough memory which can consume the node.
Okay. Yeah, because I
Yeah.
feel like the limited give us some enforcement, but the unlimited actually basically just tear down the whole node. So then
Yeah.
impose, if we don't want to tear down the node, then we have to protect. I mean, all those things can be died, but there's the, if we don't want the node died, then, and also the node is still ready, then your critical component have to be right. So that could be just take over the whole node and everybody die together. So that's normally, I always want to prevent some unlimited use, unless that's the compression, right?
I agree.
Compressible
I agree.
resource. Thanks.
Right. Thanks. That was a good discussion. Let's go back to the first item on the agenda, the evented plague bug. Harshal, can you talk about it?
Yeah, sure. I just updated with the latest PR where when Paco added an item, he was working on other PR. Now latest PR is 122778. So the issue at the core here is when the container is in created state, and if it gets detected by the kubelet, that is by sync pod, it will assume that the container creation has failed, and it will try to restart the container. And this is at the core of the issue. Now, Paco has created this PR which actually fixes it. If you see the PR, he differentiates between container state unknown and container state created, and then there is a logic he adds very simply doesn't blindly restart the container. But Clayton came up with a good suggestion there that if this is really the case, then we should have seen this with generic plague also, because containers do transition from created to running state during generic plague also, but we never see that. And our guess right now is that the reason it doesn't surface in generic plague because if you see that locks with the timestamps on it, the containers move very fast from created to running state. And generic plague doesn't see through that much window. Whereas the evented plague, if let's say there is a delay due to whatever reason in events getting arrived at kubelet, let's say if you got a created and there's a slight hiccup and you get a started event slightly later, and during that time, if the sync pod is triggered for that pod, let's say one of the containers died or something happened. So in that case, this container will be caught up, and it will be restarted. Now, if you see the latest comment there, I made a comment saying I'm trying to work on a reproducible. I'm artificially trying to sabotage a container creation, like so in generic plague, by the way. So when a container starts, the first container I want to stop at created state, and then do something in the pod that triggers the sync pod and show that the generic plague is also vulnerable to this, except it's just that it does every 1 second, and it doesn't have to depend on incoming events or anything. So that's the update. But the Pacos PR does fix the issue, except it touches a part which is used by generic plague as well. So we are being extra cautious here.
Right. Thanks for the update, Harshil. Do you have any questions? All right. I guess we have a plan there, so we'll just work on the PR and get it fixed.
Mm.
Okay, we can move on to the next one. So, Peter, you're looking for proc mount type direction.
Yeah. Hey. So basically, I've been thinking about the consequences of moving user namespaces to beta, and one of them is we could possibly move forward with proc mount type. I have been talking with David, who lives in Australia, so he can't make it to this, but he's done some research on like the paths that the kubelet masks for vanilla pods, and has a theory that like all of them would be safe if they were given to a pod with a user namespace. The motivation here is, the proc mount type, the idea of it was to allow a pod to mount another proc within the container, which allows for cases like if you want to run, Docker in Kubernetes with privilege, the outside pod container needs to be able to mount a proc, needs to have an unmasked proc. That's like a kernel limitation. And I think originally the masked locations were created because if it's not in a user namespace, that could potentially leak information from the host. So I wanted to look for direction. We have like a couple of directions we could go. We could continue to not move forward with proc mount type, which I think it's useful, and I think that there's reason to push forward. We can move on proc mount type to beta as it is now, which is a configurable pod spec field, and so that an admin would be able to opt in or out, or actually the workload author would be able to opt in and out for a container to have this. Or another option that we have available to us is we could, when a pod requests a user namespace, use that as the filtering mechanism for whether we give masked paths and read-only paths. I'm open. I just wanted to present that idea as an option and see what people think.
I like the last option, but I think we would have to be careful about security posture there. If we tie it and if we find some issues, then it's all or nothing.
Right, and that's a lot of this document is kind of just analyzing the security posture, and I think that there has been anxiety upstream with trusting user namespaces from the kernel's perspective, because when we were defining what the pod security mission would allow if a user namespace was enabled. For instance, like Jordan wanted to not allow some things that theoretically are safe, but historically there do exist CVEs about them. So I can see from that perspective, we would want it to be a configurable option. Yeah. I think I'm personally of the opinion I think I like the third option as well. I think it's cleaner. I think like the bar for a pod spec option is very high, and this kind of snuck in at a time before that was the case. Like this didn't even, it predates the KEP process and everything. I think I like trusting the kernel to enforce the security boundaries that it advertises and to treat like situations where that doesn't happen as an anomaly. But I understand the alternative as well. Tim, your hand.
Yeah, I missed the first part of what you were saying, so I apologize if you already covered this. But is there have you considered an option to either adjust the proc masks that the container runtime is applying, or kind of add in different profiles there?
So actually, currently, it's no longer up to the container runtime as of like this KEP or like this change. It's the kubelet who is making this decision.
Okay.
And the runtime isn't supposed to add any other than that which the kubelet requests. We could have profiles for this built into the kubelet, but that would functionally look the same as like a pod spec level sort of, or I mean, it could be node level as well, technically, which would allow an admin to opt into it, but would give, less granularity. That's another option.
I guess I was thinking more if it's going to be tied to user namespaces, then there's, it seems like some of these paths could be unmasked always. Some we might say, well, if you're not using user namespaces, you don't really need this protection. And then some that we say, actually, this is too unsafe. We're going to leave this as something that you have to request privileged for.
Totally. And this proposal is kind of doing that, where like the idea would be, instead of having the proc mount type be the deciding factor for the kubelet to pass down unmasked, masked paths to the runtime, it would be user namespaces.
Yeah.
A note that's worth mentioning is that it's kind of all or nothing, at least for proc. Like if there are any masked paths in proc that the kubelet tells the runtime to apply, then the outer container won't be able to mount a new proc. The kernel won't allow it. So it needs to have a fully unmasked proc to be able to do that. So either, like, I would make the recommendation, like, either, we decide that, any of them are worth, keeping the configurable unmasked proc mount option, or like we do none of them.
I see.
All right. Any more thoughts? I guess as Peter, we can probably collect more feedback on the announcement update PR.
I personally agree with your proposal, Peter. Yeah, but I'm not sure. That's only user namespace is enough or not. But so far, I think I agree to simplify this. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I will. I'll make a KEP update. I'll spell out the reasoning, and then we'll see what folks think. And worst comes to worst, we can fall back to maybe pushing for beta mount proc type if folks think that user namespaces aren't enough.
Thanks.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is Akihiro is looking for reviews on the recursive read-only. I think it just missed last time, so we should be able to hopefully get it in. I can make a pass if anyone else wants to make a pass.
I would actually like to make a. I actually like his proposal to make recursive read-only just what the read-only behavior is on the runtime level. I think that is because I think that the intention of read only was truly recursive read only, and it's kind of almost like a bug that it isn't. I recognize that it could break users, so I think it probably should be configurable on the runtime. And if Continuity went that route, I think I would advocate for Cryo to have it be configurable. But I think that the current design is a little bit it's a little bit verbose for the kind of scope of this feature, especially because I think it's really pushing for the intent to be closer to what it originally was. So just to further bike shit on this, I want to throw that into the ring.
Yeah, I think it's more about, okay, are we breaking the API, and question of how many workloads are relying on this, and if there's a chance we're going to break it.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I think we run into this situation, like we ran into this situation with what was it? Something semi-recently where we made a change. Oh, the kill policy where it's kill on C group level, and SIG Node made a decision, and then actually that broke people. So I think probably maybe as a SIG we might want to evaluate what our stance is on changing sort of this like undocumented but like through precedent expected behavior, and probably come up with a unified sort of approach to that.
Yeah, if you do that, you also need to document clearly what the expectation will be going forward, especially for some strange cases when something being mounted as a root and then a subfolder. I don't know how it will work today even, and is it possible?
I think I would push for, and I agree with Mernal that we should make some progress on this. Either we should move forward with the KEP in 130 or we should deny it as a SIG. I don't know if we can make that decision here, but I think that I agree that we should sort of push for some progress. I think Akihiro has been incredibly patient and deserves our attention.
Yeah, we should probably talk with Tim as well, because I think he was involved on the API side. Don, did you have any thoughts on this one?
I didn't follow this at all, so I will follow up. Let's follow up offline on this one.
Okay, no worries. Thanks, Don.
Thanks.
Okay, now we can move on to the last item on the agenda, which is Adrian responding to some of the questions that came up regarding checkpoint restore last week. Adrian, I see you're on the call. Do you want to talk through some of them?
Yes. Luckily last week, Augustine was.
Your volume is low. I'm not sure if that's what it is. Can't hear you. We can't hear you. We need to raise.
Can you hear me now? No, not better.
We can. It's quite low.
Is it better now? Oh no, it's the wrong input. I see. Maybe like this. Is this better? No.
Good.
Yeah, that's better.
That's better. Okay, nice. Okay, so let me know if you cannot hear me anymore. But last week, Radostin was in the meeting and brought up the checkpoint restore cap changes to the meeting. And there were a couple of questions. And one question was basically SIG Node wanted to see a demo using how to restore containers from a registry. I can demo that if you want now. It's documented on the Kubernetes blog post there. I've added the steps here also in the SIG Node agenda. If you want, I can show it to you now or at some other time. I don't know. Should I share the screen or not?
You have to see it.
Yeah, I think go for it. We have some time. So
okay, let's share the screen. Okay, can you see the terminal? Is it big enough?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so this is a really simple pod where there's one container in the pod, and let's start this container here. Once the container is running, I can access it. It's a simple stateful container. It just remembers the last state and gives it back to me, and then I can checkpoint the container. This is the thing which is currently in Kubernetes and CRI-O. So this is all from yesterday's Git checkout. So this is up to date. So this is what you would get today. So this is basically just creating the checkpoint archive and then putting the value of the file name into a variable. I also have a pull request open for adding it to kubectl. This is, oh no, this is wrong. And then it would print out this. So basically now the CP variable now contains the path to the checkpoint. And the question is now, how can you convert this to an OCI image, which you can then use to restore the container. So there's we have written a tool called checkpoint control, which can give you some information about a created checkpoint, and this basically tells you its container name, image name, ID, runtime, created, engine, IP, size, and things like this. And using the commands from the SIG Node agenda, I can now convert this into an OCI image. I use Builder for that. I'm creating a new image, and then I'm setting annotations so that CRI-O can detect that it's a container, that it's a checkpoint. Then I'm just adding the complete tar file into the container. Then I'm committing this with a tag checkpoint image latest. And then I'm just deleting the temporary container. Even if I now do a podman images, I see the container has been, the checkpoint image has been created a couple of seconds ago. And now let's delete the original pod, and then I have a second, let's see, I have a second definition here. And this now just uses, instead of the original definition was like this. So this was using an image from a remote registry, and this one just uses it now from the local registry. And now I say apply the new one, and now I can request next, and now I get the next value from the container. So it was a stateful checkpoint restore using an image to restore the container from a registry, basically. I hope this is a bit useful, at least how it currently works. So this was one of the things asked in the last meeting. Any questions concerning the restoring of containers as it works today?
So Adrian, the annotation that you use, right? Is there any effort going on to standardize that so it works the same across like CRI-O and Containerd and OCI?
Yeah, so I opened an image spec issue, I don't know, 1.5 years ago about getting this standardized, but there was not really any feedback there, unfortunately. So there was not much interest from the image spec community to standardize this. So the problem is Containerd also has such a definition, but Containerd uses protobuf definitions, which are Containerd specific. And I didn't want to bring the containerd protobuf definitions into CRI-O, and so I'm using JSON. And so now we have two different image types. The thing containerd uses is not used in Kubernetes at all, because the checkpoint restore implementation from containerd is not wired through to the CRI. So they have a checkpoint restore implementation, but nobody has done the work to wire it through the CRI. And basically, my goal currently is I'm trying to get the CAP updated, because that's what was Mike asking, to have the CAP cover all possible use cases. And once all possible use cases are listed in the CAP, then containerd would be open to merge my changes to containerd, which would include this annotation or annotation like this, so that you can restore containerd images on CRI-O and CRI-O images on containerd. So there's no technical reason to have that restore between container engines doesn't work. Currently, it's just it's not implemented, but the checkpoint will be compatible between the container engines, as at least from my experience so far. There's no technical reasons that it cannot be restored in another container engine.
Actually, thanks for this demo. Really exciting. So can you share the link in our agenda? The link about the OCI, the proposal you.
Oh yeah, I will do this later. Yeah, I can share this. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
We can also follow up with the containerd, and maybe we can have the. Let's start from the image perspective. And so then we have the common format for imaging.
Yeah, I think last week when this came up, Don, I think like originally when we said that we add this as a kubelet API, so maybe is that part ready to go to beta? I think, because I think that itself is usable, where someone can do a checkpoint and then have some way to take it offline for restoring and then analyzing maybe a security threat or something. And then the restore and all the other pieces can be a follow-up kept.
Totally. So there's the we separate, right? So because we always think about, at least I always believe checkpoint and restore is valuable for Kubernetes in general, but we understand it's so hard to start from the control plane, because how you define those kind of things, this is like, right? So all those kind of the rest of the include of the like the registry level of the image format, all those kind of things, how you reschedule this, instead of reschedule new work, and or maybe is you resume a new existing work on the new node. There are a lot of complexity. So that's why we said we want to demonstrate the community. There's the value. So obviously, at least I believe this is demonstrate the value to many people. So the node things, but no matter what, there's the couple of the things, like for example, image format, how we want to continue on those kind of things, that's will be blocker forever, right? So especially that the image format will be key if we want to enable this as the Kubernetes, not node, not Kubernetes feature, Kubernetes feature. Let's just start from there, but not necessarily mean we are block the node performance or the node move forward, and let's separate the things. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I think like, yeah, we can evolve the next steps, while also if you're happy with the node feature we have, we can push that forward for the use cases that it solves. Yeah. Right.
I had a quick question about the demo, actually. The annotation there, I'm curious, what effect does that have on the container runtime? Like when you set the annotation, does that basically signal to the runtime that this is like a checkpoint image, and then you should the runtime should basically use CRI-O to restore from it, as opposed to kind of standard? Is that kind of the intent there?
Yeah, so what we to restore a container in Kubernetes, we currently use a trick. We basically, Kubernetes tells CRI-O to create a container from that image. Then CRI-O looks at the image, and if it has the annotation, then CRI-O knows it needs to do a restore and not a create start. So basically, what we do is we do a restore and then a start instead of a create and a start. So it's kind of a I don't know, a trick to
Gotcha.
get
Okay.
So it's
Makes sense.
and we wanted it as an annotation to be readable as light as possible. We don't want to unpack the whole thing. We just want to look at the image and immediately see it's a checkpoint.
Gotcha. But like if a container runtime ran that image without knowledge, without reading the annotation, it would not be able to run it as a standard image.
No,
right?
no.
Gotcha. Okay, makes sense. Yeah, thank you for the demo. Really cool.
Yeah, Don, regarding the use cases, we still need to work with Containerd to enable those use cases and to make sure the checkpoint works, because it's the biggest concern from Mike Brown.
Yeah, and if there are no more questions about the demo, there were a couple of other questions from last week, and one question was, how would checkpoint restore work with pods? And actually, checkpoint restore with pods was one of the first proof of concepts I did in 2022, and basically I implemented kubectl drain. And the implementation is not really complicated. What I did there was I just looped over all pods over all containers in the pod. I checkpointed all the container in a loop. I created some metadata for the information about a pod, and then on restore I created a new pod with the metadata from the old pod so that it has the same name and IDs, and then I restored all the containers. So checkpointing restoring pods is not a technical problem. It's just again, how would an interface look like to checkpoint and restore a pod? So it has been implemented a long time ago, basically.
This is all on the same node, though, like not migrating to another. Yeah.
This doesn't matter basically. So you can migrate it to another node. You can use it on the same node. For the drain, it was on the same node, because on drain I just checkpointed all pods, and on restart of the kubelet, all checkpointed pods were recreated. So this was one simple use case I tried to implement at first.
The problem is just no one can figure out how to, like what I said, right? So how you are going to tell this, we need of the new API. But obviously at that time we don't see the interest from the SIG architect and also the control plane. So, but we don't want to let this feature die. So that's why so we suggest like, okay, build a node team, like the SIG node feature first. So show the demo. So now we think about this is hopefully, especially today we have the John here.
I hope to hear more often these days.
Thank you. So then can we just talk about what's the next, how we are going to enable this feature? Yeah. It is the API, more is the API, yeah.
And I think the some more challenges will be around expectations, right? Like, okay, if I have two containers in a pod and it's in the middle of a database transaction and I get checkpointed and I restore it, is it gonna go through? Like, what kind of statefulness is expected? Like, okay, checkpointing a simple counter like this makes sense, but I think when things become more complicated, there are more interactions between the containers, then I think we have to set the right expectations on where it will resume.
I agree. Especially like even right now we have the demo, sounds like the independent from the local node, then you can restore on the other node. But actually for the complex cases, we don't sure always independent from the node. Right, so there have the dependency. Explicit the implicit of the dependency. So how we are going to restore into like the new node. So we cannot guarantee those the cluster or the node is the homogeneous node and all the config is the same, all those kind of things. So it's just so that's why the how we involve with the scheduler or control plane, that's kind of more complicated.
Now we can start with simpler stateless things like JVM checkpointing, and then slowly build up from there and figure out more complicated use cases.
Okay. How do all the volume mounts work with the checkpointing? Like,
which mounts?
Like volume mounts, for example, right? Like if you've got either a local volume mounted, like a local directory,
Yeah, so that's not a problem. So it's not a problem. So if you have a bind mount from the outside, then it will just be recreated. So the thing is the directory which was bind mounted into the container needs to exist on the node.
Exactly right. So like if you move it to a node, like all these different volume, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Just trying to understand the scope. It's pretty cool though.
Yeah, and about the more complicated use cases, if all containers are in the same pod, then I think the problems about synchronization are not that big of a problem, because we would pause all containers in the pod at the same time using the C group. If there are multiple pods running, then there's currently research going on how to do checkpointing synchronized across pods. So there's work going on how to have coordinated checkpoints across multiple containers, across multiple pods, especially across multiple machines would be then even more interesting. But this is a current field of research where Radostin, who was talking about this last week, is currently working on.
One more question, Adrian. So what happens to the IP address through CNI? Do we get a new one? I'm assuming when you restore, we get a new one, right? Okay.
So this so what I did I've did this before in Podman. In Podman, I looked into recreating the same IP. So there's a way in Podman to tell that the network namespace gets the same IP address as before. I didn't. I left this completely out when I did the work on Kubernetes, because my expectation usually is, or from what I've seen, that the network topology in Kubernetes is usually much more complicated, and I'm not sure if keeping the same IP address is really useful if you have multiple things talking to each other across pod boundaries. The thing is, if you have network connections inside the pod, if everyone uses the same network namespace, and then the expectation would be you use the localhost IP address, then it would work. But currently, this is not implemented in Cryo. It is possible because I've done it for Podman in combination with CNI. I know it's possible, but I didn't touch that code in the current implementation in Cryo on Kubernetes. So.
Thanks, Adrian. Any more questions, folks? Right.
Do you guys think this is ready for us to put together some kind of a work group to try to figure out what the minimum scenarios are that we want to support going forward?
Yeah, if it helps, Mike, maybe we can just have a channel in Kubernetes Slack to begin with and see if we need something more.
Yeah, I do have the interest on this one because there's the recent emerging, even like many years ago, I'm interested, always have like we have the issue about the fast workload startup, right? So issues, and also because we are overcommitted of our node, right? We try improve of the utilization, and we overcommitted, and to some extent, then we evict of the running workload. People just say, oh, just no big deal. And they just move to another node. But you are waste about a lot of the compute power and to generate. So that's why I always feel like the checkpoint and restore have the value to play this one. And especially recently emerging about the workload startup. Workload startup is not just really just like the startup. It's more like the, okay, how I'm going to catch up my previous the work and then quickly get to in current. Otherwise, I have to restart a lot of other parallel work. So I hope this one can play. I mean, especially for those AI machine learning workload, and I hope this can play a bigger role here. So that's why, and we are good time for discussing this one. And to thank you for even we keep make this scope narrow down, but keep give us new state, new milestone.
And there are also some other people interested in this work. people from Microsoft, for example, AMD, NVIDIA. I think they might also be interested in joining this group.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, let's talk about, do we need of the work group, or maybe just we have the existing too many work group, right? So
Yep. Right.
One is the batch scheduler work, batch job work group. Unfortunately, I figured out recently, I found that one not really have enough of the signal to improve involvement. It's more like the quickly figure out how to move faster, but do not have the enough of the signal involvement. Maybe we could, if we want to think about, okay, to try to using that one, and to repurpose to the AI machine learning workload, all those kind of things. Maybe that's the one we can talk. Because it's beyond Node, right? So Node have to play big role there, but actually definitely it's beyond Node. There's the control plane, there's the scheduler, there's the API, all those kind of things.
Right. Okay. Thanks for joining today, folks. We went over time, so it's good. So next week, Sergey and I will start with planning, and because the enhancement freeze is on Feb 8th, so we need to get all that lined up. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.